Shalom Chaverim. Today we're going to talk about the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. He's a mid-19th century philosopher, died in 1855, and we're going to connect it to the Torah portion of Pekudei, which is the last portion in the book of Exodus. So, what is the connection between Kierkegaard and Pekudei? We're going to focus on really one element, or actually one very important and inspiring quote from Kierkegaard's philosophy, that in which he claims that life can be only understood backwards. And with that, it must be lived forward. And we will explain this concept. So, what is the connection to Pekudei? In Pekudei, there's a verse, comes from, verse 18 comes from chapter 40, and it goes like this. Vayakem Moshe et hamishkan, vayiten et adanav, vayasem et krashav, vayiten et berichav, vayakem et amudav. Translates to, Moses set up the tabernacle, placing its socket, setting up its planks, and inserting its bars and erecting its posts. So this is the verse that we are going to unpack. What is interesting about this verse is actually a commentary that comes from a late Middle Ages Italian commentator named Ovadia Sforno. And what Sforno says about this verse, which is really fascinating, is that according to this verse, Moses put the covering, the woven covering first, and then the beams. Meaning first the covering and then the support for the covering. Now, this commentary, this idea doesn't come out of the blue. It actually comes from the Talmud, from Masechet Shabbat. And in Masechet Shabbat, it says that the tabernacle, the Mishkan, was the curtains alone. Okay? So the beams were not called Mishkan. The beams were not called tabernacle. That's in the Talmud. From that, Sforno understands if the beams are not called tabernacle, and if it says that the tabernacle was put first, right? Let's get back to the verse, right? Moses set up the tabernacle, and then placing its sockets and its planks and its beams and all of that, right? So that means that the covering was put before the support. How is that possible? Sforno said could either be a miracle, or maybe there were actual people, like with the 4 people holding a chuppah, there are actually people holding it before the beams were put in place. And that's a very interesting commentary. Another commentator, who's an early 20th century commentator, Polish Rebbe, called Shmuel Bornstein, learned something so beautiful from it. Hear this. This is what he learns. He says this represents the people who, after the sin of the Egel, the sin of the golden calf, were giving the Mishkan, the tabernacle, before they were really able to support the spiritual level it represented. Okay, so what he means to say that sometimes one must leap into action regardless of one's readiness. And it's the action itself which propels our readiness for it. And this really brings us back to Kierkegaard and to that concept that he said. So to understand Kierkegaard, this is really interesting because mid-19th century, that means that he wrote before the mainstream of existentialist thought that we are familiar with, that of the 20th century, like Jean-Paul Sartre and Camus, but he is considered an existentialist philosopher because, just like Sartre said, he comes from the assumption that existence precedes essence, meaning that there is no predetermined essence of what a human being is. We are mainly thrown into existence, and it's up to us to create that meaning. And that, of course, creates a lot of fear and loneliness. And Kierkegaard really talks about it, especially in his book. He has a book called Fear and Trembling, which was written in 1843. And here in that book, Kierkegaard explores the concept of the leap of faith. And it's actually really cool that he does that through our stories. The book actually unpacks the story of the Akedah, of the binding of Isaac. And Kierkegaard looks at Abraham as the one that took the ultimate leap of faith. So in his book, Fear and Trembling, was written in 1843, Kierkegaard actually uses our tradition. He used the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, to basically describe the ultimate leap of faith. So what Abraham did, what Abraham was radically leaping into the absurd, willing to sacrifice his son, trusting that the purpose will be revealed, right? Some of us would say trusting that an intervention would occur, right? But the purpose would be revealed after we are willing to take the risk, right? So if you think about that, this is connecting to the concept of we only understand our life in hindsight, we only understand our life backwards, and we can never know what the future holds. But we must leap to it with a lot of faith and a lot of courage to find out. Kierkegaard described three levels of existence: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. And it's in this order. So the aesthetical was the type of people or the person that really lives for the moment, right? It's kind of like a hedonistic way of living where you just want immediate pleasures and to satisfy your desires, and everything is about the surface level of what it is and how it benefits you, right? So that's the aesthetic. The ethical is the next level of a person that lives their life by committing to moral choices and taking responsibility, right? So unpacking everything around us according to a moral code and making decisions accordingly. But the highest level of existence, according to Kierkegaard, is the religious, and that is the person that is willing to take a leap of faith, to take the risk, to live courageously and march into the unknown. And this is really something that I think that is a part of all of our lives. And really, if you try to think about where in your life you put the covering before the beams. And I think that the maybe easiest example is when we fall in love, when we find a partner that we commit our life to and promise to live together for a long period of time, maybe forever. No, none of us knows what the future holds. But this is a type of a leap of faith that we always end up making. And then years later, we understand that choice in hindsight. We understand it to be good or bad. It doesn't matter, but that's the only way we can ever understand it. In order for all of us to be able to live in that higher form of existence, we must put the covering before the beams. We must first work towards an idea that we set, that we put forth, and then we will find the support for it, exactly like is describing in the Torah while building the Mishkan. The Israelites were not ready. They were a nation of slaves in Egypt. They had a lot of doubt. They really wanted to worship the tangible and the false idols. They couldn't commit to the worship of the abstract and of the unknown, and to that receiving of the moral code. So the solution was to start by presenting the idea, trusting that the support will be built later. And this is something that we can all do in our lives. And I really encourage all of you to think where in your lives you can put the covering before the beams. And I truly believe that we are a nation of innovators, and innovation cannot occur, cannot take place unless you try to create something that was never created before, that was never done before, unless you commit to the idea that still has no support, trusting that that support will come, trusting that the idea will propel the action forward. And I also believe that as a society, we should dare to take that risk. We should dare to try new forms of living and of working together, trusting that we will find the how as we do. And only when we embrace the unknown and the uncharted we could truly create sacred spaces. Shabbat Shalom.